The rain came down in sheets that November evening, turning Seattle's streets into rivers of neon and despair. Grant Reed barely noticed, his mind was on the merger, the stocks, the empty penthouse waiting for him. Then a small hand touched his Brioni coat, and a voice no louder than a whisper shattered his carefully constructed world. "Please, sir, buy my bike. Mommy hasn't eaten in 3 days. Welcome back, my beautiful family." Before we begin, please click subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more thrilling stories, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's get into the story. Grant Reed had $43 billion, 6 homes across 3 continents, and absolutely nothing that mattered. He stood under the awning of Morrison's Steakhouse, waiting for his driver to navigate the flooding intersection, when he first saw her. A girl, maybe 10 years old, maybe younger, stood in the downpour without an umbrella, both hands gripping the handlebars of a red bicycle that had seen better years. The bike was too small for her gangly frame, its paint chipped and faded, one handlebar wrapped in duct tape. But she held it like it was made of gold. The rain had plastered her dark curls to her skull. Her sneakers, generic brands, splitting at the seams, squelched with every small step she took toward the restaurant's entrance. She wore a thin jacket, the kind you'd find at a discount store, and jeans with patches on both knees. Not fashionable patches. The kind you sewed on because you couldn't afford new pants. Grant's first instinct was to look away. Seattle had its share of desperate people, and he'd learned long ago that you couldn't save them all. He'd written checks to charities, substantial ones that earned him tax breaks and positive press. That was how you helped people in his world. Systematically. Efficiently. From a distance. But something about this girl made him pause. She wasn't begging. She wasn't crying. She stood with her spine straight, her chin lifted despite the rain streaming down her face, and there was a dignity in her bearing that seemed impossible for someone so young, so obviously desperate. "Sir." Her voice cut through the sound of traffic and rain. "Would you like to buy my bicycle?" Grant turned to face her fully. Up close, he could see that her eyes were a striking amber brown, bright and intelligent despite the exhaustion that ringed them. Her hands, small and delicate, gripped the handlebars so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. "It's not for sale, kid," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "Go home. It's cold out here. Please." The word came out steady, but he could hear the tremor beneath it. "It's a really good bike. The chain works perfect, and the tires are still good. I kept it really clean. See?" She gestured to the frame, and he noticed that despite its age and wear, someone had indeed wiped it down recently. There were no streaks of mud, no grime in the chain links. "How much?" he found himself asking, surprising himself. $50. She said it quickly, as if afraid he'd walk away before she could name her price. "That's fair, right? I looked it up. Used bikes go for around that. $50. Grant spent more than that on a single glass of scotch at his private club. He pulled out his wallet, Italian leather, slim and elegant, and extracted a $50 bill. But as he held it out to her, he stopped. "Why are you selling your bike?" The girl's jaw tightened. For a moment, he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, "Mommy hasn't eaten in 3 days." The words hit him like a physical blow. Not because they were dramatic or delivered with tears, if anything, the girl's voice had gone flat, matter of fact, as if she were reciting a grocery list instead of describing a nightmare. It was that clinical delivery, that forced calm, that made it real. Grant had attended hundreds of charity galas where people spoke about hunger and poverty in abstract terms. He'd seen photographs, watched documentaries, nodded seriously during board meetings about poverty initiatives. But he'd never stood 3 feet from a child whose mother was starving. 3 days, he heard himself say. "Yes, sir." The girl's eyes never left his face. "She keeps giving me her food." Says she's not hungry. But I know she's lying. And today I didn't go to school because I was afraid. I was afraid if I left, she wouldn't wake up. The rain continued to fall. Somewhere behind him, Grant could hear the restaurant door opening and closing, the muffled sound of laughter and conversation from people who existed in a different universe than this child. His phone buzzed in his pocket, probably Richard, his driver, announcing his arrival. "What's your name?" Grant asked. "Sky." She adjusted her grip on the bike. "Like the sky, not the TV." "Sky." He nodded slowly. "I'm Grant. And I'm going to buy your bicycle, but not for $50. Her eyes widened. "I couldn't take more, sir. That wouldn't be right. The bike's not worth $200, Grant interrupted, pulling out additional bills. "Because I collect vintage bicycles, and this one is exactly what I've been looking for." It was a lie, and they both knew it. But Grant watched the girl's face carefully, waiting to see if she would take offense at his obvious charity. Some people, proud people, would rather starve than accept pity. But Sky wasn't some people. She was a child trying to keep her mother alive. "Thank you," she whispered, and now her voice did crack, just a little. She took the money with shaking hands and carefully folded it, tucking it deep into her jacket pocket, then zipping it closed. "Thank you so much. Where do you live?" Grant asked. "Let me give you a ride." "My car's coming." "No." The word came out sharp, almost panicked. Sky took a step back, clutching the bike between them like a shield. "I mean, no thank you, sir. I'm okay. I can walk. It's not far." Grant recognized fear when he saw it. The girl had been taught not to get into cars with strangers. Good. That meant someone was looking out for her, teaching her to survive. But it also meant she was about to walk home in the freezing rain without a coat or umbrella, and he'd just taken her only valuable possession. "Then at least take this." He shrugged off his overcoat, a $15,000 Brioni that his stylist had insisted would be perfect for Seattle's weather. "You can return it when your mom feels better." Sky stared at the coat as if he'd offered her a spaceship. "Sir, I can't. That's way too nice. What if I ruin it?" "It's water resistant," Grant said, which was true. "And I have others." Also true, though it sounded grotesque to say it out loud to a child who probably owned 2 jackets total. "Please. I'll worry if you don't take it." Something about that last sentence seemed to decide her. Sky carefully leaned the bicycle against her hip and allowed Grant to drape the massive coat over her shoulders. It swallowed her completely, the hem dragging on the wet pavement, the sleeves extending a foot past her fingertips. "I'll bring it back," she promised. "I'll wash it first and everything. There's no rush." Grant stepped back, suddenly feeling awkward. "What did you say to a child you just met, whose mother was starving?" "Take care of your mom, Sky." She nodded, and for just a moment, her composure cracked. Her eyes went glassy with tears that she blinked back furiously. "She's a good person, sir. She really is. We just got unlucky, is all. But we're going to be okay now. Because of you." Then she turned and began pushing the red bicycle down the sidewalk, her small figure wrapped in his enormous coat, disappearing into the rain and the Seattle twilight. Grant stood frozen under the awning, watching until she vanished from sight. His phone buzzed again. Richard, definitely. The merger documents were waiting at home. He had a conference call with Tokyo in 2 hours. His life, his carefully scheduled, meticulously controlled, phenomenally successful life, was waiting. But Grant couldn't move. In his mind, he kept seeing Sky's amber eyes. Kept hearing her voice, "Mommy hasn't eaten in 3 days." When Richard finally pulled up in the black Mercedes, Grant climbed into the back seat without a word. The car's interior smelled like new leather and climate-controlled comfort. The seat warmers activated automatically. Soft classical music played through speakers that cost more than most people's cars. "Home, Mr. Reed?" Richard asked, glancing in the rearview mirror. Grant opened his mouth to say yes. The word was right there, simple and easy. "Yes. Take me home. Let me forget about the girl with the red bicycle and the mother who was starving somewhere in this city while he slept on Egyptian cotton sheets in a penthouse worth $30 million. But instead, he heard himself say, "No. Circle the block." Slowly. Richard's eyebrows rose slightly, the man's only indication of surprise in the 15 years he'd worked for Grant, but he simply nodded and eased the car back into traffic. Grant pressed his face close to the window, searching the streets. There, a flash of black coat, too large, too expensive, walking east on Pike Street. He watched Skye turn down a side street, still pushing the bicycle, her head bent against the rain. "Follow her," Grant said quietly. "But keep your distance. Don't let her see us." "Sir." Now Richard's voice carried a note of concern. "Is everything all right?" "No," Grant said, surprised by his own honesty. "No, Richard. I don't think it is." They followed Skye through 6 blocks of deteriorating neighborhood, watching as the boutiques and restaurants gave way to dollar stores and check-cashing places. The streetlights became sparser, the sidewalks more cracked. This wasn't the Seattle that appeared in tourism brochures. Finally, Skye stopped in front of a building that made Grant's chest tighten. It was 5 stories of water-stained concrete and broken windows, the kind of place that should have been condemned years ago. A sign out front read Eastlake Arms Apartments, but half the letters had fallen off, leaving only EAAKRMS. Skye wrestled the bicycle through a security door that was missing its lock entirely, then disappeared inside. "Wait here," Grant told Richard, and before his driver could protest, he was out of the car and moving toward the building. The lobby smelled like mold and urine and something else Grant couldn't identify, desperation, maybe, or hopelessness given physical form. The elevator had an "out of order" sign taped to it that looked months old. Grant headed for the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. He caught up with Skye on the 3rd-floor landing. She was struggling with the bicycle, trying to haul it up the stairs while his coat dragged around her feet. "Let me help," Grant said. Skye spun around, her eyes going wide with fear. Then recognition flooded her face, followed immediately by embarrassment. "Sir. What are you? You shouldn't be here. This place isn't, it's not safe for someone like you." "Someone like me?" Grant bent to lift the bicycle, noting that it weighed almost nothing. "You mean people who can't navigate stairs as well as you can?" A ghost of a smile crossed Skye's face. "I mean people wearing shoes that cost more than a month's rent." "Sharp kid." Grant followed her up another flight of stairs, and then another. The hallways were dim, lit by flickering fluorescent bulbs that cast everything in a sickly yellow glow. Behind one door, a baby was crying. Behind another, a television blared at maximum volume. Skye stopped at apartment 4C. She pulled out a key, a single, worn brass key on a faded ribbon, and unlocked 3 separate locks on the door. "Wait here," she whispered. "Let me check if Mama's awake. She doesn't like surprises." Before Grant could respond, Skye had slipped inside, leaving the door open just a crack. He stood in the hallway, feeling absurdly out of place in his $1,000 shoes and custom suit, listening to Skye's voice drift through the gap. "Mama. Mama, wake up. I got money for food. Real money. We're going to be okay." A woman's voice, weak but warm. "Baby, what did you do?" "I sold my bike. To a nice man. He gave me $200, Mama." "200. A pause. Then, "Skye, that bike was the only thing you." "It's okay, Mama. Really. I don't need it. And now you can eat. You have to eat, Mama. Please." Grant's hand was on the doorframe, steadying himself, when he heard the woman speak again. This time, her voice was stronger, tinged with panic. This man, Sky. Did he ask you to come with him? Did he ask where you live? No, Mama. Nothing like that. He was good. He gave me his coat and everything. But Mama. Sky's voice dropped to a whisper that Grant had to strain to hear. Mama, I think he followed me. He's outside right now. The door flew open. And Grant Reed, billionaire, master of the universe, man who had negotiated deals with heads of state and CEOs of Fortune 500 companies without flinching, found himself staring into a face he had spent 12 years trying to forget. Hello, Era, he whispered. The woman in the wheelchair, thin, frail, but unmistakably the woman who had broken his heart and disappeared from his life over a decade ago, stared back at him with eyes full of shock, fear, and something that looked heartbreakingly like shame. Grant, she breathed. Oh my God. Grant. And the world, which had already tilted sideways when he met Sky in the rain, now flipped completely upside down. For a moment that stretched into eternity, nobody moved. Grant stood in the doorway of apartment 4C, staring at the woman he'd once planned to marry. Era sat frozen in her wheelchair, one hand gripping the armrest so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Sky looked between them, confusion clouding her young face. You two know each other? Sky asked, her voice small. Grant couldn't speak. His mind was reeling, struggling to reconcile the woman before him with the Era he'd known 12 years ago. That Era had been radiant, full of life, laughter, dreams. She'd been a graduate student working on her master's in social work, volunteering at shelters on weekends, talking passionately about changing the world. She'd had this way of lighting up a room just by walking into it. The woman in the wheelchair was a ghost of that person. She'd lost weight, too much weight. Her dark skin, once glowing with health, now looked ashen, stretched thin over her cheekbones. Her hair, which she'd once worn in elaborate braids and twists, was pulled back in a simple, slightly tangled ponytail. But her eyes, those were the same. Deep brown, intelligent, and right now, filled with a fear that made Grant's heart clench. Grant, please, Era whispered. Please don't. Don't what? Grant stepped into the apartment, and Era flinched. The movement was slight but unmistakable, and it stopped him cold. Era, I'm not going to hurt you. I would never. I know, she said quickly. I know that. I just. She glanced at Sky, who was watching them with growing alarm. Baby, why don't you go wash up? We'll talk in a minute. But Mama. Sky. Please. Something in Era's tone made Sky obey. She cast one more worried look at Grant before disappearing through a doorway that led to what must have been a bedroom. The moment she was gone, Era's composure crumbled. You can't be here, she said, her voice breaking. Grant, you have to go. If he finds out you were here, if he thinks I contacted you. If who finds out? Grant moved closer, kneeling beside the wheelchair so they were at eye level. Era, what happened to you? Where have you been? It doesn't matter. Like hell it doesn't. Grant's voice came out harsher than he intended. You disappeared. 12 years ago, you just vanished. No note, no explanation. I searched for you for months, Era. I hired investigators. I called everyone we knew. And then I got that single text message, I'm marrying someone else. Don't look for me. That was it. After 3 years together, that's all I got. Era's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, she whispered. God, Grant, I'm so sorry. But you have to understand, I thought I was doing the right thing. Victor, he promised me everything. Security. Stability. A real future. And you were still struggling back then, still trying to get your company off the ground. I couldn't see, she stopped, closing her eyes. I was a fool. Victor. The name tasted like poison on Grant's tongue. Victor Castellano. Era's shocked silence was answer enough. Grant remembered Victor, the heir to a shipping fortune, the kind of man who wore his wealth like armor. They'd met at a business conference where Grant had been trying to secure investors for his fledgling tech startup. Victor had looked at Grant like he was something scraped off a shoe. And apparently, shortly after that conference, Victor had set his sights on Era. "He's Sky's father," Grant said. It wasn't a question. Era nodded, one tear escaping to track down her cheek. "Yes. We were married for 8 years. And for most of them, I thought I'd made the right choice. He gave me a beautiful home, expensive things. We traveled. I lived the life I thought I wanted." Her voice turned bitter. "And then I got pregnant." Grant's jaw tightened. "What did he do to you, Era?" "Grant. What did he do?" Era's hands trembled in her lap. "He didn't want children. Said they would ruin his lifestyle, tie him down. He wanted me to terminate the pregnancy. When I refused, he became different. Angry all the time. Controlling. He isolated me from my family, monitored my phone calls, controlled every dollar I spent." She took a shaky breath. "When I was 7 months pregnant, we had a fight. A bad one. I told him I was leaving, taking the baby, starting over. And he pushed me down the stairs." The apartment's walls seemed to close in on Grant. The fluorescent light flickered overhead, casting shadows that danced across Era's face. Somewhere in the building, that baby was still crying. "He pushed you," Grant repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "I woke up in the hospital 3 days later. Sky was born premature but healthy. And I was paralyzed from the waist down. Victor told the doctors it was an accident, that I'd tripped. I was so medicated, so confused, I didn't contradict him." Era's voice had gone flat again, that same clinical tone Sky had used earlier. "Survival mode. He stayed long enough to make sure I couldn't press charges, long enough to establish his narrative. Then he divorced me, claimed I was an unfit mother, fought me for custody. I spent every penny I had on lawyers just to keep Sky. And now?" Grant asked, though he could already see the answer in the water-stained walls, the empty refrigerator visible through the kitchenette doorway, Era's skeletal frame. "Now he's remarried. Living in his penthouse on Mercer Island with his new wife, pretending Sky and I don't exist. The court ordered child support, but he hasn't paid in 18 months. My lawyer says I can't afford to take him back to court." Era met Grant's eyes directly for the first time. "We've been getting by on disability payments and what I can make from online transcription work. But it's not enough. It's never enough." Grant stood, his mind already racing through possibilities, solutions, plans. "That ends today." "Grant, no. That ends today," he repeated firmly. "I'm going to." "You're going to leave," Era interrupted. "Please. I can't have you involved in this. Victor is dangerous, and he's vindictive, and if he finds out you're helping us, then let him find out." Grant pulled out his phone. "I'll have my assistant arrange for a delivery of groceries tonight. Tomorrow, we'll discuss long-term solutions. Medical care, legal representation, a better apartment. I don't want your charity." Era's voice cracked. "Don't you understand? I made my choice 12 years ago. I chose wrong, and these are the consequences. I don't get to come crying back to you now for rescue." Grant looked at her, really looked at her. At the pride warring with desperation in her eyes. At the way her hands shook despite her defiant words. At the door behind which Sky was probably listening, scared and confused. "This isn't about us," he said quietly. This is about a 10-year-old girl who tried to sell her bicycle in the rain so her mother could eat. This is about Sky. She deserves better than this, Era. And whether you want my help or not, I'm giving it to her." Before Era could respond, Sky reappeared in the doorway. She'd changed into pajamas, too thin for the cold apartment, and her wet hair hung in ringlets around her face. "Are you going to help us?" Sky asked Grant directly, her amber eyes searching his face. "Or are you going to leave like everyone else?" Grant knelt down to Sky's level. "I'm going to help you," he promised. "Starting right now." Grant made 3 phone calls before he left apartment 4C that night. The first was to his personal assistant, Jennifer, who'd worked for him long enough not to question why he was ordering a month's worth of groceries to be delivered to a dilapidated apartment building at 9 o'clock on a Thursday evening. "High quality," he specified. "Fresh produce, good cuts of meat, dairy products. And Jennifer? Include things a kid would like. Real food, not just staples." The second call was to Dr. Patricia Owens, the best physical therapist in Seattle and a woman who owed Grant a favor after he'd funded her clinic's expansion 2 years ago. "I need you to do a home assessment," he said. "Tomorrow morning. I'll text you the address." The third call was to his head of security. "I need a complete background check on Victor Castellano. Everything. Financial records, business dealings, personal life. I want to know what he eats for breakfast and how many times he blinks per minute. You have 48 hours. Era watched him make these calls with an expression caught between gratitude and resentment. Sky, meanwhile, had curled up in her mother's lap, a gangly 10-year-old folding herself small to fit in the wheelchair, and was watching Grant with those unsettlingly perceptive amber eyes. "You're rich," Sky observed when Grant finished his calls. "Like, really, really rich." "Sky." Era's voice was sharp with embarrassment. But Grant smiled, the first genuine smile he'd felt in longer than he could remember. "Yes," he told Sky honestly. "I am. Richer than my father?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Grant saw Era stiffen, saw her mouth open to redirect the conversation. But Sky deserved honesty, and Grant was done with people lying to her to spare her feelings. "Yes," he said. "Much richer." Sky considered this, her head tilted to one side. "But you're nice." "He's not nice at all." "How does that work?" "Sky, that's enough," Era said, but her voice had lost its edge. She sounded tired beyond measure. Grant pulled up a wobbly kitchen chair and sat down, ignoring the fact that his suit pants probably cost more than everything in the apartment combined. "Your father and I are very different people," he said carefully. "Money doesn't make someone good or bad. It just makes their choices louder." "What does that mean?" Sky asked. "It means that when you have money, your decisions affect more people. You can choose to help or choose to hurt, and either way, the impact is bigger." Grant leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Your mom taught me that, actually. A long time ago." Era's eyes went wide. "Grant. She told me that with power comes responsibility. That if I ever made it big, I had to remember the people who were struggling. That I couldn't just hoard wealth like a dragon sitting on gold." He smiled at the memory. "She made me promise, actually. Said if I ever became a millionaire, I had to use it for good." "And did you?" Sky asked. "Keep your promise?" Grant thought about his foundations, his scholarships, his anonymous donations to causes Era had cared about. He'd done it all mechanically, checking boxes, fulfilling obligations. He'd never once felt the impact of his charity the way he felt it now, sitting in this crumbling apartment with a child who tried to sell her bicycle to save her mother. "I tried," he said honestly. "But I don't think I really understood what she meant. Not until tonight." A knock at the door made them all jump. Sky scrambled off her mother's lap, and Era's hand went instinctively to her daughter's shoulder, protective and afraid. "It's just the groceries," Grant said, standing. "I'll get it." He opened the door to find 2 delivery workers with 8 large bags of food. Era's gasp was audible as they carried everything into the tiny kitchenette, filling the counter, the floor, every available surface. "This is too much," Era whispered as the delivery workers left. "Grant, this is way too much." "It's a month's worth," Grant said. "Maybe 6 weeks if you're careful. And before you argue, remember, this isn't about you. This is about making sure Sky has what she needs." It was a low blow, using Sky as leverage, but Grant watched it work. Era's protest died on her lips as she looked at her daughter, who was staring at the food with an expression of wonder that broke Grant's heart into smaller pieces. "Can I really eat whatever I want?" Sky asked, her voice small. "Baby, of course," Era started, but her voice cracked. "Yes," Grant said firmly. "Whatever you want, whenever you want it. That's the whole point." Sky walked slowly to the counter, her hand reaching out to touch a package of fresh strawberries as if they might disappear. "Mama loves strawberries," she said quietly. "But they're expensive. I haven't seen them in so long." Grant had to look away. He focused on Era instead, saw the tears streaming freely down her face now, saw the way she was biting her lip to keep from sobbing. Pride and gratitude warred in her expression, and he knew this was killing her, accepting help from the man she'd left behind, the man she deemed not good enough. "I'll be back tomorrow," Grant said, heading for the door before the emotion in the room could drown him. "Dr. Owens will come by in the morning. She's going to assess your condition, see what kind of therapy might help." "Grant." Era's voice stopped him at the threshold. "Why are you doing this?" He turned back to look at her, this woman who'd broken his heart, who'd chosen wealth over love and paid a terrible price for it. He looked at Sky, clutching that package of strawberries like treasure. And he thought about the red bicycle, still leaning against the wall where he'd left it, a symbol of everything wrong with the world and everything he'd failed to see until tonight. "Because 12 years ago, you asked me to promise something," he said quietly. "And I'm finally understanding what you meant." He left before either of them could respond, taking the stairs 2 at a time, bursting out into the rain that was still falling on Seattle streets. Richard was waiting with the car, and Grant climbed in without a word. "Home, sir?" Richard asked. Grant looked back at the building, at the crumbling concrete and broken windows, at the light glowing in apartment 4C where Era and Sky were probably opening those groceries, probably crying and laughing and trying to process what had just happened to their lives. "Yeah," Grant said softly. "Home." But for the first time in 12 years, his penthouse didn't feel like home. It felt like a prison made of marble and glass, a monument to everything he'd achieved and nothing that mattered. Tomorrow, he decided, everything would change. For all of them. Dr. Patricia Owens arrived at apartment 4C at precisely 9 o'clock the next morning, carrying a medical bag and an expression of professional optimism that faltered slightly when she saw the building. Grant had arrived 10 minutes earlier with fresh coffee and pastries, and was currently sitting on the floor with Sky, helping her with homework while Era watched with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Mrs. Castellano?" Dr. Owens extended her hand to Era, who took it hesitantly. "I'm Dr. Owens. Grant asked me to come assess your condition. May I?" For the next hour, Grant kept Sky occupied in the bedroom, reading to her, asking about school, anything to give Era privacy. But he could hear snippets of conversation through the thin walls. Medical terminology. Era's soft responses. Dr. Owens' encouraging murmurs. When they emerged, Dr. Owens was smiling. "Good news," she said, addressing both Era and Grant. "The paralysis isn't complete. You have some sensation in your legs, correct?" Era nodded, her eyes cautiously hopeful. "Sometimes. Not much, but, yes. With intensive physical therapy, proper nutrition, and the right equipment, there's a possibility, and I want to stress this is not a guarantee, but a real possibility that you could regain some mobility. Maybe even walk with assistance. The words hung in the air like a prayer. Grant saw Era's hands fly to her mouth, saw tears spring to her eyes. Sky, who'd been listening from the doorway, let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. "How much?" Era asked, and Grant heard the desperation in her voice. "How much would the therapy cost?" Dr. Owens glanced at Grant, who gave her a subtle nod. "That's already been arranged," the doctor said gently. "You'll come to my clinic 3 times a week. We'll start Monday." Grant, Era's voice was barely a whisper. "Don't," he said firmly. "Just, don't. Let yourself have this, Era." After Dr. Owens left with a promise to send over the treatment plan, Grant found himself alone with Era while Sky was in her room, packing for school. The apartment felt smaller somehow, the silence heavier. "I need to tell you something," Era said finally. "About Victor. About why I'm so afraid of him finding out you're helping us." Grant pulled the wobbly chair closer to her wheelchair. "I'm listening. When I first left him, when I got out of the hospital with Sky, I tried to get help. I went to a lawyer, tried to build a case for assault. But Victor." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Victor has connections everywhere. Judges, politicians, police officers. Within a week, my lawyer dropped my case, citing insufficient evidence. My family started receiving threats, nothing explicit, just enough to scare them. My sister's business lost its lease. My brother got audited by the IRS." Grant's jaw tightened. "He weaponized his wealth." "Exactly. So I stopped fighting. I took the divorce settlement, which was pittance compared to what he's worth, and I tried to just disappear. Raise Sky quietly. Stay off his radar." Era's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "But Grant, if he finds out you're in our lives, if he thinks I'm using Sky to get to your money through you, he'll destroy us. He'll take her from me. And he has the power to do it." "Not anymore, he doesn't." Grant pulled out his phone and opened an email from his head of security. "I had Victor investigated. Thoroughly." Era's eyes went wide. "Grant, what did you do?" "What I should have done the moment I found out what he did to you." Grant scrolled through the report. "Victor Castellano isn't just a deadbeat father. He's been cooking his company's books for years. Inflating revenues, hiding losses, misleading investors. The SEC would have a field day with this information." "You can't," Era started, but Grant held up a hand. "I'm not going to report him. Not yet. But I am going to pay him a visit. And I'm going to make him understand that his days of terrorizing you are over." "He won't listen to threats," Era said, fear creeping into her voice. "He'll just escalate. Grant, please, you don't know what he's capable of. And he doesn't know what I'm capable of." Grant leaned forward, taking Era's hand. Her fingers were cold, trembling. "I'm not the struggling startup founder you left 12 years ago, Era. I've built an empire. I have resources, connections, lawyers who make his lawyers look like law school dropouts. Victor Castellano has been the biggest fish in his little pond for too long. It's time he met a shark." A sound from the doorway made them both turn. Sky stood there, backpack slung over one shoulder, staring at Grant with something like awe on her face. "You're going to fight my father?" she asked. Grant met her gaze steadily. "If I have to. But I'd prefer to make him do the right thing voluntarily." "He won't," Sky said matter-of-factly. "He told me once that I was a mistake. That I ruined his life. People who think like that don't suddenly become good." The casual way she delivered this devastating information, as if she'd long since accepted her father's rejection, made Grant want to put his fist through a wall. Instead, he stood and walked over to Sky, crouching down to her eye level. "Your father is wrong," Grant said. "You're not a mistake. You're a miracle. And I'm going to make sure he pays for every day he's failed to see that. Sky studied his face for a long moment. Then, slowly, she wrapped her arms around his neck in a hug that nearly knocked him over. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for being nice." Grant hugged her back, this child who tried to sell her bicycle in the rain, who'd learned too young that the world could be cruel and arbitrary. Over her shoulder, he saw Era crying silently, her hand pressed to her mouth. When Sky pulled away and headed out for school, with money for lunch and a promise that Grant would be back later, Era wheeled herself closer to him. "Grant Reed," she said softly, "what happened to you? The man I knew 12 years ago was driven and ambitious, but he was also cautious. Careful. You're talking about going to war with one of the wealthiest men in Seattle." Grant thought about the question. About the man he'd been, hungry, desperate to prove himself, willing to let Era walk away rather than fight for her. About the man he'd become, successful beyond his wildest dreams but empty inside, going through motions, checking boxes, never truly living. "I met a little girl in the rain," he said finally. "And she reminded me what matters." He left to prepare for battle, the image of Sky's amber eyes and Era's grateful tears burned into his memory. Victor Castellano had no idea what was coming. Victor Castellano's penthouse on Mercer Island was everything Grant expected, ostentatious, cold, and designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Lake Washington. Modern art that probably cost millions hung on walls so white they hurt to look at. Everything was sharp angles and expensive materials, a monument to wealth without warmth. Grant had called ahead, using his assistant to arrange a business meeting. Victor, always eager to network with someone wealthier than himself, had agreed immediately. He probably thought Grant wanted to discuss investments or partnerships. He was about to learn otherwise. Victor emerged from his home office wearing a tailored suit and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was handsome in a polished, artificial way, perfectly styled hair, blindingly white teeth, a tan that came from exotic vacations rather than honest work. He extended his hand. "Grant Reed. It's been a long time." "What, 10 years? 12. Victor's grip was firm, performative. "I heard you've done quite well for yourself. That AI platform of yours is revolutionary, or so they tell me." Grant released his hand and didn't sit down despite Victor's gesture toward the leather couches. 12 years, he confirmed. "Around the time you married Era Thompson." Victor's smile froze. "I'm sorry. Era Thompson. Now Era Castellano, though I understand she kept your name after the divorce. Or should I say, after you pushed her down the stairs and left her paralyzed." The color drained from Victor's face, then flooded back in an angry rush. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, Reed, but I suggest you leave. Now." "Not a game." Grant pulled out his phone, swiping to a photo of Sky holding her red bicycle. "This is your daughter. Her name is Sky. She's 10 years old, brilliant, and until yesterday, she was trying to sell her bike to buy food because you haven't paid child support in 18 months. Victor's expression cycled through shock, anger, and finally settled on cold calculation. "That child has nothing to do with me. The divorce was finalized years ago. Whatever arrangement was made." "The arrangement," Grant interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet, "was that you would pay $1,200 a month in child support. You paid for 6 months, then stopped. Era couldn't afford to take you back to court, so you just forgot you had a daughter. Forgot you put her mother in a wheelchair. It was an accident." Victor's voice had gone hard. "The court agreed it was an accident. And frankly, this is none of your business, Reed. Unless." His eyes narrowed with sudden understanding. "Oh, I see. You and Era. You knew her before me, didn't you? Is that what this is? Some white knight fantasy where you rescue your old girlfriend?" Grant took a step closer, and something in his expression made Victor take an involuntary step back. What this is, Grant said softly, is me giving you one chance to do the right thing. You're going to resume child support payments, backdated for every month you missed. You're also going to establish a trust fund for Sky's education. College, graduate school, whatever she needs. And you're going to do it quietly, without trying to get custody or access, because we both know you don't actually want to be a father. Victor laughed, an ugly, bitter sound. Or what? You'll tell my wife I have a kid from my first marriage. She already knows. She doesn't care. I've insulated myself quite well, Reed. There's nothing you can threaten me with. I'm not threatening you. Grant pulled up another file on his phone. I'm simply providing information. See, I had my forensic accountants look at Castellano Shipping's financials. Fascinating reading. All those inflated revenue projections. The offshore accounts. The investors who think they're getting 7% returns when really they're funding your lifestyle. Victor's face went white. You're bluffing. The SEC doesn't bluff. And neither do the dozen investors who'd pull their money the moment they learned they've been defrauded. Grant scrolled through the documents. Here's my favorite part, your leverage to the breaking point. Your company is a house of cards, Victor. One strong wind and it all comes down. I could be that wind. You wouldn't dare. But Victor's voice shook. Do you know who I am? The connections I have. Do you know who I am? Grant countered. I don't just have connections, Victor. I own them. Judges, politicians, media outlets, the same people you think protect you. They take my calls first. Because my money is real, earned through actual innovation and value creation. Yours is built on fraud and inheritance. We are not the same. Victor sank onto the couch, his confidence crumbling. What do you want? I told you. Child support, backdated and current. A trust fund for Sky's education, let's say $2 million to start. And you stay away from them. Completely. No custody plays, no intimidation, no threats to Era's family. You pretend they don't exist, just like you've been doing, except now you pay for the privilege. And if I refuse? Grant leaned down, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Then I'll destroy you. Not just your company, you. I'll make sure every person in Seattle knows what you did to Era. I'll make sure your new wife knows you've been hiding a child from her, that you're paying nothing while living in luxury. I'll make sure the SEC, the FBI, and every regulatory agency with an acronym investigates every shady deal you've ever made. And when your empire crumbles and you're standing in the wreckage wondering how it all went so wrong, I'll be there to remind you, you could have just taken care of your daughter. The silence stretched between them. Outside, a seaplane took off from Lake Washington, its engine a distant buzz against the glass. Victor sat with his head in his hands, the picture of a man watching his carefully constructed world teeter on the edge of collapse. How long do I have? He asked finally. The paperwork will be drawn up by Monday. You'll sign it, transfer the funds, and then we never speak again. Unless you miss a payment. Then we have this conversation again, except I won't be nearly as friendly. Grant turned to leave, but Victor's voice stopped him at the door. She chose me, you know. Victor's words were meant to wound. 12 years ago, Era looked at both of us and chose me. Because I had what you didn't, money, status, security. Don't pretend you're better than me, Reed. You're just richer now. That's the only difference. Grant looked back at the broken man on the couch, this person who'd pushed a pregnant woman down the stairs, who'd abandoned his daughter, who measured his worth in dollars and dominance. No, Victor, Grant said quietly. The difference is that I learned money means nothing if you use it to hurt people. You never learned that lesson. And that's why you'll die alone in this sterile penthouse, while I get to go home to the family you threw away. He left without another word, Victor's silence his only answer. In the elevator down, Grant's hands shook with adrenaline and barely contained rage. He'd done it. He'd faced the monster who'd destroyed Era's life and forced him to bend. But the victory felt hollow, incomplete. Because punishing Victor didn't undo the damage. It didn't erase Sky's hunger or Era's pain or the 12 years they'd all lost. Still, it was a start. Grant pulled out his phone and texted Era, "It's done. He'll pay. You're safe now." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, "Thank you doesn't seem like enough." Grant typed back, "Then don't thank me. Just let me keep helping. Let me be there." This time, her response came immediately, "Okay." 1 word. But it felt like everything. 3 months changed everything. Grant stood in the doorway of Dr. Owen's clinic, watching Era work through her physical therapy session. She was gripping parallel bars, her face contorted with effort and determination, her legs trembling as she tried to support her own weight. Sweat dripped down her temples. Her physical therapist, a patient woman named Carmen, stood beside her, offering gentle encouragement. 5 more seconds, Carmen said. "You can do this, Era." 4, 3, 2, 1. Perfect. Era collapsed back into her wheelchair, breathing hard but smiling. That smile, Grant had seen it more frequently over the past weeks, and each time it appeared, something in his chest loosened, something that had been wound tight for 12 years. "You're getting stronger," he said, stepping into the room. "Last week you could barely hold yourself up for 10 seconds. "Last week I also couldn't feel my left ankle," Era replied, rolling toward him. "Today I felt it. Grant, I actually felt it when my foot touched the ground." The wonder in her voice made Grant's throat tight. He'd funded countless medical treatments over the years, anonymous donations to hospitals, research facilities, experimental therapies. But he'd never witnessed the impact like this, never seen hope kindle in someone's eyes as their body slowly remembered how to function. "Dr. Owens thinks I might be able to use a walker by Christmas," Era continued, her voice trembling with cautious optimism. "A walker, Grant. 3 months ago, I couldn't afford physical therapy at all. Now I'm talking about walking." "You'll do more than that," Grant said confidently. "You'll dance. You'll run. You'll do everything they told you was impossible." Era reached out and took his hand, squeezing gently. "I couldn't have done this without you." It had become their routine. Grant would pick up Sky from school 3 days a week, help her with homework at his penthouse, which she declared like a museum but comfier, while Era attended therapy. Then they'd all have dinner together, sometimes at the apartment, increasingly often at Grant's place where his chef prepared meals that made Sky's eyes go wide with delight. The apartment on Eastlake had changed too. Grant had hired contractors to fix the plumbing, replace the windows, update the electrical. Era had protested initially, but Grant had simply said, "Sky deserves a safe home," and she'd relented. It was easier, he'd learned, to do things for Sky than for Era. Her pride bent when it came to her daughter. Victor had signed the papers. $2 million in a trust fund for Sky's education, plus 18 months of back child support and ongoing monthly payments transferred automatically. Grant's lawyers had made sure the agreement was ironclad. Victor couldn't touch them now without facing legal and financial destruction. But money, Grant was learning, was the easy part. "Daddy Grant, look." Sky's voice echoed through the clinic as she burst through the doors, still wearing her school backpack. She'd started calling him that about a month ago, tentatively at first, watching his reaction. When he'd smiled and said, "I like the sound of that," she'd used it ever since. She held up a paper with a bright red A+ at the top. "I got a perfect score on my math test. Mrs. Henderson said it was the hardest test all year, and I'm the only one who got every question right." Grant high-fived her, then pulled her into a hug. "That's my brilliant girl. I knew all that studying would pay off. Can we celebrate with ice cream?" Sky asked hopefully. "Sky, We just had ice cream yesterday, Era said, but she was smiling. That was yesterday ice cream, Sky argued with impeccable 10-year-old logic. This is celebration ice cream. Totally different. Grant laughed. How can we argue with that reasoning? Ice cream it is. Later, after they'd stuffed themselves with sundaes at Sky's favorite parlor and dropped her at home for the evening, Grant and Era sat in his car outside the apartment building. The sun was setting over Seattle, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The rain had stopped for once, leaving the city clean and gleaming. I need to talk to you about something, Era said, her voice serious. Grant's stomach clenched. Okay. These past 3 months. Grant, you've given us everything. A safe home, medical care, stability, hope. Sky adores you. And I. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I'm falling in love with you again. Or maybe I never stopped. I don't know. But I need to know what this is for you. Are you doing this out of guilt? Obligation? Some need to rescue your ex-girlfriend? Grant turned to face her fully. Do you remember what you said to me the night before you left? 12 years ago. Era shook her head, tears already forming in her eyes. You said that I was the best man you'd ever known, but that being good wasn't enough. That you needed security, stability, a future you could count on. And you were right, I couldn't give you that then. I was broke, my company was failing, and I had nothing but dreams and determination. Grant reached over and took her hand. When you left, it destroyed me. I threw myself into work, into building my empire, telling myself it was to prove you wrong. But really, I think I was trying to become someone worthy of you. Grant. Let me finish, he said gently. When I saw Sky in the rain, when I followed her to your apartment and realized it was you. Era, my first thought wasn't I can rescue her. It was I never stopped loving her. Every woman I've dated in the past 12 years, I compared to you. Every relationship failed because they weren't you. Tears streamed down Era's face now. I made the worst mistake of my life when I chose Victor over you. I chose money over love, security over passion, and I paid for it in ways I never imagined. I don't deserve a second chance. Maybe not, Grant agreed. But Sky deserves a father who loves her. And I do, Era. I love that little girl like she's my own. And I love you, not because of who you were 12 years ago, but because of who you are now. You're a survivor. A warrior. The best mother I've ever seen. And I want to spend the rest of my life proving to both of you that love is enough when it's backed by commitment. Era laughed through her tears. That's the most romantic and practical thing anyone's ever said to me. I'm a businessman, Grant said with a small smile. I deal in facts and results. And the fact is, the 3 months I've spent with you and Sky have meant more to me than all the billions I've made. That's quantifiable data, and the conclusion is obvious. What conclusion? Era whispered. Grant leaned across the center console and kissed her, gently at first, then deeper as she responded, her hands coming up to frame his face. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. That I want this to be permanent, he said. You, me, Sky. A real family. Not because I'm rescuing you, but because you rescued me from a life that had everything except what matters. Era pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. I can't promise I'll ever walk perfectly again. I can't promise I won't have bad days, or that my past won't haunt us, or... I'm not asking for promises, Grant interrupted. I'm asking for a chance. To build something real with you. To give Sky the childhood she deserves. To fall asleep next to you every night and wake up every morning grateful that I bought a red bicycle from a little girl in the rain. You're serious about this? It wasn't a question. Completely. Era was quiet for a long moment, studying his face. Then she smiled, that brilliant, beautiful smile he'd fallen in love with over a decade ago. Then yes, she said simply. Yes to all of it. Let's build something real. Grant kissed her again, and this time it felt like a beginning instead of a second chance. Like the universe had spent 12 years teaching them both what they needed to learn, and now, finally, they were ready. Above them, in apartment 4C, Sky pressed her face to the window and watched them with a smile of her own. She'd known all along, she thought. Known from the moment Grant bought her bicycle that he was different. That he was the one who would save them. No, not save them. Join them. Because they'd already saved themselves. Grant had just helped them remember how strong they were. Grant should have known peace wouldn't come easy. He was in his office reviewing architectural plans for a new community center, something he and Era had been designing together, when his lawyer, Robert Chen, called with an edge in his voice that Grant had learned meant trouble. "We have a problem," Robert said without preamble. "Victor Castellano just filed a lawsuit against you. He's claiming you extorted him, used fabricated evidence to force him into the settlement agreement. He wants the trust fund dissolved and is demanding $5 million in damages." Grant's hand tightened on his phone. He's bluffing. Maybe. But he's also hired Morrison and Associates. They don't take cases they can't win. Grant, if this goes to trial, everything becomes public. The evidence you gathered, Era's past, Sky. Robert paused. Victor's playing a different game now. He doesn't care about winning. He wants to make you hurt. After hanging up, Grant sat in silence, watching the Seattle skyline through his office windows. 6 months had passed since that rainy night with the red bicycle. 6 months of watching Era grow stronger, of helping Sky with homework, of building something that felt like a real life. And now Victor wanted to tear it all down. He called Era immediately. "He's doing what?" Her voice cracked with fear. "Grant, this is exactly what I was afraid of. He's going to drag us through court, make everything public. Sky will have to know all the details about what he did to me, about." "Era, breathe," Grant said, though his own heart was racing. "We'll fight this. Robert says we have a strong case. But at what cost?" Era's voice dropped to a whisper. "Grant, maybe we should just give him what he wants. End this before it destroys everything we've built." "No." The word came out fierce. "We don't surrender to bullies, Era. We fight." That night, Grant sat with Sky on his penthouse balcony, watching the city lights flicker on. She'd been quieter than usual during dinner, pushing food around her plate, and he knew she'd overheard Era on the phone, knew she understood more than she should have to. "Is my father going to take me away?" Sky asked suddenly, her voice small in the darkness. Grant's heart broke. "No, sweetheart. I promise you, that's not going to happen. But he's rich too, right? And he's my real father. What if the judge says I have to go live with him?" "Sky, look at me." Grant waited until her amber eyes met his. "Your father doesn't want you. He never has. This lawsuit isn't about you, it's about him trying to hurt me because I made him face what he did. But I won't let him use you as a weapon. Neither will your mom. Neither will any of the people who actually love you. Do you love me?" Sky asked, and the vulnerability in her voice nearly undid him. "More than anything," Grant said without hesitation. "You and your mom are my family now. And I protect my family." Sky was quiet for a moment, then said something that made Grant's breath catch. "I wish you were my real father. I wish you'd been there from the beginning." Grant pulled her close, this brave, brilliant girl who tried to sell her bicycle in the rain. "I wish I had been too. But we found each other when we needed each other most. Sometimes that's how families work." The next morning, Grant met with Robert and a team of lawyers. They spread documents across the conference table, evidence of Victor's financial crimes, testimony from Era's doctors, records of missed child support payments. We can destroy him, Robert said. Countersue for harassment, file complaints with the SEC, leak the information about his business dealings. He'll drop the lawsuit within a week. Grant stared at the documents. A year ago, he would have done it without hesitation. Crush the opposition. Win at all costs. That was how you survived in business. But Sky's voice echoed in his mind, I wish you were my real father. There has to be another way, Grant said. Something that protects Era and Sky without turning this into a war that damages them in the crossfire. Grant, Robert said carefully, sometimes war is unavoidable. Before Grant could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. He opened it, then froze. The message contained screenshots, text messages between Victor and his new wife from 2 years ago, just after Sky was born. The wife asking, "Did you ever have children?" Victor's response, "No. Never wanted them. Never will." Another screenshot showed her asking about his first marriage. Victor, ancient history. She was nobody. Meant nothing. There were dozens more, Victor systematically lying about Sky's existence, erasing his daughter from his life, denying her to the woman he claimed to love. A follow-up message appeared, thought you should have these. Victor's wife deserves to know the truth about the man she married. So does the judge. A friend. Grant stared at the messages, his mind racing. He hadn't leaked this information. He'd specifically decided against it, not wanting to drag Victor's current wife into their battle. But someone else had. His phone rang. An unlisted number. Mr. Reed? A woman's voice, cultured and cold. My name is Patricia Castellano. I believe we should talk about my husband. Or rather, my soon-to-be ex-husband. What would you do if you had evidence that could destroy someone who hurt you and your family? Would you use it, or would you try to find a more peaceful solution? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. The meeting with Patricia Castellano happened at a neutral location, a coffee shop in downtown Seattle where no one would recognize either of them. She was elegant, composed, and absolutely furious. I've known about Sky for 3 months, Patricia said, sliding a folder across the table. Found the child support payments Victor was making, the ones he'd been hiding from me. Did some digging. Learned what he did to Era, how he abandoned his own daughter. She took a sip of coffee, her hand trembling slightly. I have children from my first marriage, Mr. Reed. Daughters. And I've been allowing them to spend time with a man who pushed a pregnant woman down the stairs. I'm sorry, Grant said, and meant it. Don't be. Be strategic. Patricia opened the folder. This is everything. His offshore accounts, his affairs, his business dealings that would make the SEC have a field day. I'm filing for divorce, and I'm going to make sure he loses everything. But I need your help. My help? You have resources I don't. Lawyers, investigators, connections. Help me take him down properly, and I'll make sure he drops this ridiculous lawsuit against you. More than that, I'll make sure he never bothers Era or Sky again. He'll be too busy trying to stay out of prison. Grant studied her face. This isn't just about betrayal, is it? Patricia's eyes hardened. My youngest daughter is 10. The same age as Sky. And I keep thinking, if Victor could do that to his own child, what might he have done to mine if they'd ever displeased him? She leaned forward. So no, Mr. Reed. This isn't just about betrayal. This is about making sure a monster can't hurt anyone else's children. Grant extended his hand. Then we have a deal. The lawsuit collapsed within 2 weeks. Patricia Castellano had been true to her word. Her lawyers filed for divorce with documentation so damning that Victor's attorneys advised him to settle everything immediately, the divorce, the lawsuit against Grant, and his obligations to Sky. The alternative was criminal prosecution for fraud and assault charges that Patricia had convinced Era to finally file. Victor signed everything. Then he disappeared. Grant heard through his network that he'd moved to Singapore, tail between his legs, leaving behind a ruined reputation and a trail of people he'd hurt. Good riddance. But Grant barely thought about Victor anymore. He had more important things on his mind. Like the fact that today, 8 months after buying a red bicycle in the rain, Era was going to walk. The physical therapy gym was crowded, Dr. Owens, Carmen the therapist, Sky bouncing with nervous energy, and Grant standing to the side with his hands clenched so tight his knuckles were white. Era sat in her wheelchair at one end of the parallel bars, her face a mixture of determination and terror. "You don't have to do this today," Dr. Owens said gently. "We can wait until you feel ready." "I'm ready," Era said, her voice steady. "I've been ready for 8 months. I'm done waiting." She gripped the parallel bars and pulled herself to standing. Her legs shook violently, and Grant could see the strain on her face, the sweat already beading on her forehead. But she held herself upright. "Okay," Carmen said, positioning herself beside Era. "Just like we practiced. One step at a time. I've got you." Era lifted her right foot, just an inch off the ground, and moved it forward. Her left leg trembled with the effort of supporting her weight. Then the left foot moved. Another step. Then another. Sky was crying, her hands pressed to her mouth. Grant realized he was holding his breath. 4 steps. 5. 6. "I can't," Era gasped, her arms shaking. "Yes, you can," Grant said, finding his voice. "Era, look at me. You can do this." She lifted her eyes to meet his, and something passed between them, all the pain, all the years, all the love that had survived everything. Era took another step. Then another. 10 steps down the parallel bars, she collapsed back into her wheelchair, sobbing and laughing at the same time. Sky rushed to her mother, throwing her arms around her neck. Dr. Owens was wiping tears from her own eyes. Carmen was clapping. But Grant couldn't move. He stood frozen, watching Era hold her daughter, watching this woman who'd been told she'd never walk again prove everyone wrong through sheer force of will. "Grant?" Era called out, still crying. "Did you see? I walked. I actually walked." He crossed the room and dropped to his knees beside her wheelchair, taking both her hands in his. "You're incredible," he whispered. "You're the strongest person I've ever known." "I couldn't have done it without you," Era said, squeezing his hands. "Without the therapy, the support, the belief that I could." "No," Grant interrupted. "You did this. Your strength, your determination. I just got to witness it." Era smiled through her tears, then looked down at Sky. "Baby, can you give us a minute?" Sky nodded, suddenly looking wise beyond her 10 years, and walked over to Carmen to review the video they'd taken of the walk. When they were relatively alone, Era took a deep breath. "I have something to say, and I need to say it while I still have the courage." Grant's heart began to pound. "Okay. You've been patient with me. So patient. You've let me set the pace of everything, the therapy, our relationship, how we move forward. You've put your life on hold for 8 months to be here for Sky and me." Era's voice wavered. "And I'm done making you wait. Era, I'm not waiting for anything. I'm exactly where I want to be. That's why I love you," she said softly. "That's why I'm done being afraid. Grant Reed, I know traditionally the man does this, but I've never been traditional, and I just walked for the first time in 11 years, so I'm feeling pretty fearless right now." She took another breath. "Will you marry me?" Grant's mind went blank. Then it flooded with everything, the rain, the bicycle, Sky's voice asking him to buy it, finding Era again, watching her fight to reclaim her life, falling in love with both of them more deeply every day. "Yes," he breathed. "Yes, absolutely yes." He kissed her, vaguely aware of applause breaking out around them, of Sky's excited squeal, of Dr. Owens saying something about this being the best outcome she'd ever witnessed. When they broke apart, Grant reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Era's eyes widened. "How did you?" "I've been carrying this for 3 months, Grant admitted. Waiting for the right moment. I was going to ask you tonight at dinner. You just beat me to it." He opened the box to reveal a simple platinum band with a single diamond, elegant, understated, nothing like the ostentatious ring Victor had probably given her. This was about love, not display. "It's perfect," Era whispered as Grant slid it onto her finger. Sky appeared at their side, her face glowing. "Does this mean Grant is going to be my real dad?" "If you'll have me," Grant said, looking at Sky seriously. "I'd like to adopt you, if that's okay. Make it official." Sky's answer was to launch herself at him, nearly knocking him over. "Yes. Yes, yes, yes." Grant held her tight, this brave girl who'd sold her bicycle to save her mother, who'd led him back to the life he was meant to live. Over her shoulder, he met Era's eyes and saw his own joy reflected back at him. "I have an idea," Grant said when Sky finally released him. "How would you two feel about moving into the penthouse? Not as guests, as family. We can convert one of the rooms into Sky's bedroom, whatever she wants. Gaming setup, library, art studio." "Really?" Sky's eyes went huge. "I could really live there." "It's your home now," Grant said. "All of ours." Era wheeled closer, taking both Grant's hand and Sky's. "Are you sure about this? It's a big step. Once we do this, there's no going back." Grant thought about his empty penthouse, his hollow life before that rainy November evening. He thought about the red bicycle that still sat in his office. He'd kept it, a reminder of what mattered. "I've never been more sure of anything," he said. "This is what I want. You two are what I want. Everything else is just details." "Then let's go home," Era said, smiling. "All of us. Together." And for the first time in 12 years, Grant understood what home really meant. 1 year after Grant bought a red bicycle in the rain, he stood at the altar of a small chapel in Seattle, watching the woman he loved walk toward him. Actually walk. Era moved slowly, carefully, her hand resting lightly on Sky's shoulder for support. She'd insisted on walking down the aisle, no wheelchair, no assistance beyond her daughter. She wore a simple cream dress that flowing around her, and her natural hair was styled in elegant twists adorned with tiny white flowers. She was the most beautiful thing Grant had ever seen. Sky, serving as both maid of honor and support, wore a matching cream dress and carried a bouquet of red roses. Her smile was so wide it looked like it might split her face in half. The chapel was intimate, filled only with people who mattered: Dr. Owens and Carmen, Grant's assistant Jennifer and driver Richard, Patricia Castellano with her daughters, Era's sister and brother who'd reconciled with her after learning the full truth about Victor, and a handful of close friends. No press, no spectacle. Just love. When Era finally reached the altar, slightly breathless but triumphant, Sky carefully transferred her mother's hand to Grant's. "Take care of her," Sky whispered loudly enough for the front rows to hear. "Or I'll be very disappointed in you." Laughter rippled through the chapel. Grant squeezed Sky's hand. "I promise." The ceremony was brief but meaningful. They'd written their own vows, and when it was Grant's turn to speak, he looked into Era's eyes and said the words he'd been preparing for months. 12 years ago, I lost you and thought I'd never recover. I built an empire trying to fill the hole you left, but nothing worked. Then a little girl tried to sell me a bicycle in the rain, and I learned that the universe doesn't give us what we want, it gives us what we need, exactly when we need it. His voice caught. I needed to find you again. I needed to remember what matters. I needed to learn that love isn't about being enough, it's about choosing each other every single day, in every way that counts. Era was crying, but her smile never wavered. When it was her turn, she spoke clearly and confidently. I made a terrible mistake when I left you. I chose security over love, and I paid for it in ways I never imagined. But that mistake led me to Sky, and she's the best thing that ever happened to me. And somehow, impossibly, that mistake also led me back to you, a wiser, humbler, more grateful version of you. A version of me that knows exactly how precious real love is. She squeezed his hands. I choose you, Grant. Today and every day after. I choose us. When the officiant pronounced them married and Grant kissed his wife, the chapel erupted in applause. Sky whistled loudly, making everyone laugh again. The reception was held at Grant's penthouse, their penthouse now. Sky had moved into the largest guest room, which they'd converted into a combination bedroom and art studio. The walls were covered with her drawings, and her bookshelf overflowed with volumes Grant kept buying her. She was thriving, on her roll at her new private school, friends coming over for sleepovers, talking about maybe joining the debate team. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Grant found himself on the balcony with Era, watching the Seattle skyline sparkle in the darkness. She leaned against him, and he wrapped his arms around her waist. Mrs. Reed, he murmured against her hair. How does it feel? Like coming home after being lost for a very long time, she replied. Like everything that happened, all the pain, all the mistakes, was leading to this moment. I have something to show you, Grant said, pulling out his phone. He opened a folder filled with architectural renderings and documents. I've been working on this for months. Wanted it to be perfect before I told you. Era took the phone, scrolling through images of a beautiful community center, modern but warm, with therapy rooms, classrooms, a commercial kitchen, offices, and a large central space. Grant, this is stunning. What is it? It's the Red Bicycle Foundation, Grant said quietly. A nonprofit dedicated to helping families in crisis. Single parents, people who've lost everything, kids who need support. We'll provide job training, childcare, medical resources, legal aid, temporary housing assistance. Everything we wish had existed for you and Sky. Era stared at the renderings, tears streaming down her face. Grant. The building breaks ground next month. I've already hired a director and staff. But I need someone to oversee the vision, make sure we're actually helping people and not just throwing money at problems. He turned her to face him. I need you, Era. Your degree in social work, your experience, your understanding of what people really need, this foundation needs you at its heart. You want me to run it? Era's voice was barely a whisper. I want us to run it together. You handle the programs and outreach, I'll handle the funding and operations. We'll build something that actually changes lives. And Sky can be part of it too. She's already said she wants to volunteer, help other kids who are struggling. Era looked back at the renderings, at the beautiful building that would bear the name of her daughter's bicycle, the bicycle that had saved all of them. How many families could we help? Hundreds the first year. Thousands eventually. Grant pulled up another document. I've already committed $50 million to get started, but that's just the beginning. We'll fundraise, get corporate sponsors, build a sustainable model. This isn't charity, Era, this is a movement. A movement, Era repeated, her smile growing. Started by a little girl selling her bicycle in the rain. The bravest little girl I ever met, Grant agreed. They stood in comfortable silence, imagining the future they'd build together. Then Sky's voice called from inside, Are you guys coming back? We're about to cut the cake. Coming. Era called back. She started to walk toward the door, moving carefully but confidently. She'd been walking without assistance for 3 months now, though she still tired easily. Dr. Owens said that was normal, that she'd continue to gain strength. But Grant noticed she'd left something behind, the elegant cane she'd been using. When he picked it up to bring to her, she waved it away. I don't need it tonight, she said. Tonight I'm dancing with my husband. Era, You don't have to. I want to, she interrupted. Just one dance. Nice and slow. I want to remember this, our wedding night, dancing in our home, with our daughter watching. I want to remember feeling whole again. So they danced. One slow, careful dance while Sky recorded it on her phone and guests watched with tears in their eyes. Era leaned heavily on Grant, and he knew she'd be exhausted tomorrow, but neither of them cared. They swayed together in the living room of the penthouse that had once been a monument to loneliness and was now filled with laughter and love. Later, after the guests had gone and Sky had fallen asleep in her room clutching her phone with the video of her parents dancing, Grant and Era sat together in the quiet darkness. Do you ever think about what would have happened if Sky hadn't tried to sell her bicycle that night? Era asked. If you just walked past her, gotten in your car, gone home? Grant considered the question. Sometimes. And it terrifies me, how close I came to missing this. Missing you. Missing the chance to be Sky's father, to build the foundation, to actually live instead of just existing. But you didn't miss it, Era said softly. You stopped. You listened. You cared enough to follow a little girl home in the rain. That says everything about who you are, Grant. Who I became, he corrected. You made me this person, Era. Both times. 12 years ago, you challenged me to be better, to build something meaningful. And this year, you showed me what courage really looks like. What fighting for your family means. What love actually is when it's tested. Era kissed him gently. We saved each other. Yeah, Grant agreed. We did. The Red Bicycle Foundation's grand opening drew a crowd of over 500 people. The building stood in the heart of Seattle, its red bicycle logo proudly displayed above the entrance. Inside, families were already being helped, a single mother getting job training while her children attended the free childcare program, a disabled veteran receiving physical therapy, a formerly homeless family moving into transitional housing arranged by the foundation's case managers. Grant stood at the podium, looking out at the assembled crowd. 2 years ago, he began, I met a little girl in the rain. She was trying to sell her bicycle to buy food for her mother. That encounter changed my life in ways I never could have imagined. He gestured to where Era and Sky stood together in the front row. Sky was 12 now, taller and more confident, but her amber eyes still held that same fierce intelligence. Era stood beside her without any assistance, her arm around her daughter's shoulders. That little girl is now my daughter, Grant continued. And her mother is my wife. Together, we've built this foundation to ensure that no family has to face the kind of desperation they faced. That no child has to sell their most precious possession just to survive. He pulled out a photograph, the red bicycle, faded and worn, that still sat in his office. This bicycle represents everything this foundation stands for. Sacrifice. Dignity. Hope. The belief that we're all connected, and that helping others isn't charity, it's humanity. Sky stepped up to the microphone, poised despite her young age. I used to be embarrassed about selling my bike, she said, her voice clear and strong. I thought it meant I was poor, that something was wrong with me. But my dad, she looked at Grant with a smile that still made his heart swell, taught me that it meant I was brave. That asking for help isn't weakness. It's strength. The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. But Grant only had eyes for his family, Era beaming with pride, Sky standing tall and confident, both of them healthy and happy and whole. After the ceremony, as they toured the facility and met the families already being helped, a young woman approached them hesitantly. She held the hand of a small boy, maybe 7 years old, and carried a battered backpack that looked like it held everything she owned. Excuse me, she said softly. Are you the people who started this place? The Red Bicycle Foundation? We are, Era said warmly. How can we help you? The woman's eyes filled with tears. My son and I, we've been living in my car for 3 weeks. I lost my job, couldn't pay rent. I heard about this place on the news. Is it true you help people like us? Sky stepped forward before either adult could respond. She took the little boy's hand and smiled at him. Yes, she said with absolute certainty. That's exactly what we do. We help families. Because everyone deserves a chance. Everyone deserves hope. As Era and Grant connected the woman with a case manager, as they watched her face transform from desperation to cautious optimism, they shared a look that needed no words. This was why they'd survived everything. This was what all the pain had been for. Not just to find each other again, though that would have been enough. But to transform their own suffering into something that could heal others. To take a moment of desperate kindness, a man buying a bicycle in the rain, and turn it into a movement that would change thousands of lives. That night, back home in their penthouse, Grant found Sky on the balcony where this whole journey had deepened, looking out at the city lights. Hey, kiddo, he said, joining her. Quite a day, huh? Dad? Sky said, just, Dad, now, no qualifier needed. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't tried to sell you my bike that night? Grant put his arm around her shoulders. Sometimes. But then I remember that maybe it wasn't chance. Maybe the universe knew exactly what it was doing, putting a brave girl with a red bicycle in front of a man who'd forgotten how to see what mattered. Sky leaned against him. I'm glad I was brave that night. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. They stood together in comfortable silence, father and daughter, watching over the city that had witnessed their transformation. Somewhere out there, other families were struggling, hurting, desperately holding on. But now there was a place for them to turn. A foundation built on the simple truth that one act of kindness could change everything. The Red Bicycle Foundation would be there for them, just as Grant had been there for Sky on that rainy November evening. Some stories end with happily ever after. This one ended with purpose. And that, Grant thought as he held his daughter close while his wife joined them on the balcony, was so much better.
From the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for tuning in and watching this video. You being here is the best encouragement I could ask for. The simplest and best way to show your support and tell me you want to see more content is to like this video and subscribe to the channel. That's your way of sending me love. I don't want the adventure to stop yet though. To enjoy more thrilling videos, go ahead and click the next video thumbnail you see right now. Enjoy and thanks again.